Hey everyone, and welcome to the premiere episode of Fun with Flags with myself, Soda, the Canadian. And can you please pronounce that?
50 גוונים של geek.
Which means in Hebrew, 50 Shades of Geek. How's it going, dude?
I'm fine. It's been a rough couple of weeks, obviously, and just came to a head this weekend. But other than that, all honey, as we say here. Everything's honey.
So for those of you who don't know, this is mine and 50 Shades of Geek's new show, because we originally used to do a show on here called The Northern Countdown with our dearly departed friend Ben Rainer, and it didn't feel right to continue that particular show without Ben. So 50 and I, we were talking like we want to keep doing stuff, but what do we do? And I came up with the idea of, well, I don't know much about Israel, and I'm pretty sure you don't know much about Canada. So I figured, why not educate ourselves and have some fun with it? So we'll be talking about a lot of different things, very Canadian, and a lot of different things, very Israeli. And with the exception today, the way the format's going to go is I'm going to do a show dedicated to a topic, and then the next show, 50 is going to do the same thing. But today we're going to do something a little special. And 50, if you wouldn't mind introducing that.
Before we do, though,
yes, of course,
the two of us were doing it for this guy right here.
Always. We miss you, Ben.
And forever. We miss you, man.
And full disclosure, we're recording this on the 1 month anniversary of his passing, which is a little surreal, the way it all fell into place.
We didn't plan to do this on this day, but we also didn't plan on losing our friend.
Yeah. So, and there is a GoFundMe. We were raising money for Ben. There is a GoFundMe that is out there. If you follow my Twitter, I can find it there, and I'll post it in the description as well. But yeah, we wanted to continue on for Ben, and this is actually the best way we could do it, because we're gonna have some fun with this.
Yeah, because even the origin of the name comes from one of Ben's favorite things,
which is 50 came up with the name. And where did the name come from, Ben? 50? Dear Lord, I just had a slip. Called you Ben.
I'll take that as a compliment.
It's gonna be weird.
Yeah, but it's from The Big Bang Theory.
Yeah,
so that was. And again, not to start this whole episode on a downer, but before we get down to the actual topic, there's another thing that we need to discuss.
Yeah,
is our hearts and prayers go to the families of the victims that were either killed or injured during the Israeli terror attacks over the past weekend. The 7 people who unfortunately tragically didn't make it, and the other surviving wounded still in the hospital and various different stages of conditions. Mm-hmm. So our hearts and prayers go out to these guys, to all these people, and if you're fine with it, let's just have a bit of a moment of silence.
Agreed.
For,
All right, let's kick off the show then.
Yeah. So now that we gotten all the sad stuff out of the way, so we sort of decided that the first topic, which for the first episode we're going to do half and half, as opposed to one just talking about one single thing the entire episode, is how each of our respective countries were founded.
Mm-hmm.
Events that led up to the foundation and the Declaration of Independence for each of these countries. Now, obviously, a lot of the build-up and a lot of the details could one day potentially turn into topics for episodes of their own, so we will be skipping a lot of stuff. But
Right. So basically, like what I'm using is I'm using the timeline of Canadian history using Wikipedia because it actually breaks it down to exact important events. So that's what I'm going to be using because the thing about Canadian history, it's like just the history about any other country. There's a lot of murkiness involved in it, and I'm not familiar with a lot of it, and it's not something that I'm not willing to touch on if I don't know the circumstances. And I'm talking things like about the basically the atrocities done to the Native Americans over here and stuff like that. Like I want to respect it, but I also don't want to speak out of turn, if that makes sense. So if I don't discuss it, it's not that I don't know about it. It's just I don't know enough about it to give it to do it justice. It shouldn't come from this, fat white guy. You know what I mean?
yeah, and I'm using this because I had a great teacher in high school, and I remember everything she taught me for my history exams.
I'm also very much older than 50 and don't remember all this stuff because I learned it like 20 years ago.
And you're also doing drugs.
Dude, it's like 9:30 in the morning and I'm not.
But you have done, and that
yeah, pretty much the last 2 years of COVID. Yeah. No, it's once we start getting into other topics, Canadian history, like spoilers, when we start talking about hockey, I don't need to. That I can do off the top of my head.
Well, yeah. I mean, you have to turn in your Canadian membership card if you don't know hockey start to finish all the way through, right?
Yeah, and there's some important Canadian hockey events that I will definitely be covering. For example, at some point in the future, I will definitely be discussing the Summit Series of 1972, which is this iconic war on ice between Canada and Russia. Which is fascinating, especially like all the socio-political stuff that went with it too.
Well, it's a good thing we have someone here that's going to talk about sports because I don't know shit.
Exactly. And 50 is going to do a lot more history because there's a lot of rich history in Israel, which, as we know, is one of the oldest places around.
Yeah. One of the oldest civilizations in the world.
Exactly. All right. So I'm going to start it off. Basically, our history more or less starts off in 1497 when Genovese navigator John Shabbat lands on the Matthew of Bristol somewhere in the northern Atlantic coast of North America, where he claimed the land for England. The precise location of it is widely debated, but generally to be believed to be on Newfoundland, which for some who don't know is actually the site of the first Viking settlement in North America. A lot of people thought it was Christopher Columbus that was the first to be here. Actually, it was the Vikings.
It was the Vikings. They were here first. And I love that. And I love that they named this newfound land Newfoundland.
Right. I know, it's so perfect. And you can actually
it's like J.K. Rowling naming things. Like, what do we call this grim old place? Grim old place.
Right? It's right on the nose, but it works. And you can actually go and visit these Viking settlements at Lansa Meadows. Like, they're still around.
Like, they actually left evidence of being there?
Pretty much, more or less. Like, yeah, it's this big hill, but it's a Viking longhouse.
Because I was under the impression that they got there and then just went back.
No, they settled. I'm not quite sure how long they were here, but they settled for a while.
Cool.
And then they went back. Yeah, they weren't here that long. They were here a few years, maybe.
So not long enough.
No, not long enough, but it's still important enough to be a part of history. And then in the 16th century. More explorers, of course, landed in Canada. Not really much happened between when John Shabbat landed in 1497 and the 17th century, unfortunately. But in 1605 is when French colonists under Samuel de Champlain established the first permanent European settlement in future Canada at Port Royal, founding the colony that would actually become known as Acadia. So that was the first name of sorts for Canada, and is actually a word that is still used primarily for a certain select group of French people. They are known as the Acadians. These do still exist.
So it's like Pangea.
In a way, yeah. Yeah, it was a French colony. It was a colony of New France in northeastern North America, which includes part of what are now the Maritime provinces, the Gaspé Peninsula, and the main river to the Kennebec River. So it's primarily a part of Eastern Canada. But there are still Acadians around.
Cool.
And then from there, Quebec City was founded 5 years later, and Quebec City is one of the oldest cities in Canada, also founded by Samuel de Champlain, and it became the capital of New France. The very first census here was taken in 1666, which makes that date a little auspicious. Now,
1666 when the Fire of London started?
Might be.
I think it might have been around the same time.
It might be.
I'll look it up while you're talking.
And then on May 2nd, 1670, probably one of the biggest merchandise companies in the world was founded, the Hudson's Bay Company. Do you know what the Hudson's Bay Company is, 50?
I am familiar with the Hudson River, but not the Hudson's Bay.
That is basically how it came in, but it's a Canadian retail business group, and it started as a fur trading business in the 17th century. It is the oldest corporation in Canada, and now it's actually just a proper store. But basically, the company, after incorporation by an English charter in 1677, the company functioned as a de facto government in parts of North America for nearly 200 years until the HBC sold its land it owned.
A fur company?
It started off as a fur trading company, yes.
As acting as a government?
It was very, very weird. It was very colonial back then.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
By the way, I looked it up. It is 1666, the Fire of London.
Oh, well, there you go. And then by the
something I remember from my Doctor Who knowledge.
There you go. Yeah, Doctor Who's surprisingly a good place to go find information. And then it's more a little on the Hudson's Bay Company, but it was in the 19th century, in the 1800s, when the company started doing mercantile business, selling more products than just furs. That's when they started doing homeware and stuff. And now it is like this major company in Canada. They're all over, very pricey, but they're all over. And then next into the 18th century, we had several treaties and stuff. We had the Great Peace of Montreal between New France and 39 First Nations finalized. Again, that's not something I'm going to go into because that's actually not something I don't know a lot about. There was also the war. Exactly. There was the War of Spanish Succession that ended by the Treaty of Utrecht in 1713, which France cedes the territory of Acadia to Britain and renounces claim to some British territories in Canada, as well as its claim to a monopoly of trade with the indigenous population, but retains controls of Ile Royale colony, which is current-day Cape Breton and Prince Edward Island. Fast forward another 36 years, Halifax is founded and settled by the British, making the first time that public rather than private capital was used to settle a British colony in the Americas. Halifax is a very important city in Canadian history. There was a massive explosion there in the early 20th century. That is a topic I will be talking about. And then it was also where the bodies that were recovered from the Titanic were put on display to be claimed. They converted a curling rink. That is actually something I will definitely be talking about because it's a little known part of the Titanic. It's the Titanic, and it's a little known story of the Titanic because everyone knows what happens after the ship sinks, up to the Carpathia, but nobody really knows what happened after that and how much of an important part Canada actually plays into it. So that's definitely something I'm going to be talking about because it's very haunting.
So could you explain why the bodies of the people from the Titanic were displayed in Canada and not...
Because Halifax was closest to where they sank.
Oh, okay.
And so what they did is they hired freighters, not freighters. They hired like salvage ships and stuff to go out there, and some of them were out there for a couple weeks. They had a mortician on the boat for the wealthy ones, and the ones who could be identified. The wealthy ones were put in coffins naturally. The middle class and steerage who were identified were usually thrown into sacks. With identification tags, and then anyone else, unfortunately, who was either poor or just too badly damaged to be claimed, I guess, to be identified, they were buried at sea. Unfortunately, they found children. They found a whole whack of it really, when you read about it, it really makes you think, and it's something I wish more people talked about. But that's a story for another time. Let's see what else is there. In 1758, there was a French naval fortress at Louisbourg that was sieged by the British for the second time, having been returned to France after previous occupation. After being used to stage attacks on French Canada the following year, British soldiers reduced the fortress to rubble to prevent its return to France for a second time. And then in 1760 and 1761, you had the Halifax Treaties, which were signed between the Wabanaki Confederacy and the British Crown to end warring between the Indigenous people of the Maritimes and the British. And there's a long, complicated history between Indigenous and Canadians. It's sad, really. Now this is the interesting one. This will definitely be its own episode. It's the 7 Years' War. The 7 Years' War is basically a war between the United States and Britain. And this is where Canada, if I'm not mistaken, burned down Britain burned down the White House.
Wow.
Yeah, that's
what was the date?
It was the 7 Years' War in 1763. I'm just looking that up to confirm that. I believe it was the 7 Years' War, or it might have been the War of 1812. One of the two. Either way, it's definitely going to be talked about because, damn it, we burnt down the White House and it needs to be it needs to be observed.
So you or the British?
The British, but we'll take it.
Gotta take any victory whenever you can.
Pretty much. And then also in 1763, you had the Royal Proclamation of 1763 issued by King George III forbidding settlement west of the Appalachian Mountains, which was delineated as an Indian reserve, and we all know how that went. Let's see what else in there. The invasion of Quebec and the Battle of Quebec take place during the American Revolutionary War against Great Britain. These became a failed attempt at seizing military control of the British province of Quebec and convinced the French-speaking Canadians to join the revolution on the side of the 13 colonies. So, yeah, believe it or not, we've been part of some very much historical things.
Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? And then in following that, in 1782 and 1783, there was a peace treaty between Great Britain and the United States that was signed, citing one of the clauses George Washington insisted on the return of any present or former slaves. As part of documenting an evacuation of former slaves to British North America, the Book of Negroes, I apologize, was compiled in New York City. Enslaved Americans in America who escaped to the British during the American Revolutionary War became the first settlement of Black Nova Scotians and Black Canadians. So, fun fact there. And then in 1784, under the terms of the Haldimand Proclamation, 550,000 acres of the lands purchased from the Mississaugas is granted to the Mohawks and the other 5 nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy. Basically, it's a tract extending 6 miles on either side of the Grand River from source to mouth. However, it was later determined that the head of the Grand River was outside of the lands purchased from the Mississaugas. In 1792, Governor Simcoe unilaterally reduced the land grant to 270 acres. Later land sales, government actions, and the creation of the 6 nations of the Grand River Reserve would reduce the lands under Indigenous possession to a small fraction of the original grant. Yikes. And this is an important one in the progress of Canada. 1791, the Constitutional Act of 1791 divides the province of Quebec into Upper and Lower Canada, which is modern-day Ontario and Quebec. So originally, those were the quote-unquote the first 2 provinces, Upper and Lower Canada.
What? Do you have maps or visual aids or something?
I don't have any of that prepared, but I can do that right now if you don't mind.
So Upper and Lower Canada.
Yep. So this is basically what it is.
But again, because of where I'm from, the only thing that pops into my mind is like the separation of the Roman Empire into the Western and the Eastern, right. And it's hard for me to visualize this without.
Yeah, that's my fault. I should have been more prepared, but I do have a picture here of what it looked like circa 1791. So just give me one moment to share it. So yeah, basically this is what Canada looked like in its infancy, is this right here. So this is, I don't know why lower is higher up in Canada. It's really weird, but yeah, Lower Canada.
Canadians are weird.
Yeah, Lower Canada is part of what is now Newfoundland. This is Labrador right here. And then Upper Canada is mostly Lower Ontario.
Oh, that's why it's called Lower Ontario?
I guess, yeah. Because like all this right here is Ontario now. And all of this is Quebec.
And all the white stuff is not controlled by any government?
what, for lack of a better word, wasn't claimed back then. It was still the wild frontier, for lack of a better term. It wasn't settled.
Okay.
Like that all happens. Like British Columbia wasn't added to Canada properly till after it was founded, for example.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, and then during the War of 1812 is when Louis Accord learns of an American plan to launch a surprise attack on the British forces and walks 20 miles to warn the defenders. It is basically, oh God, Paul Revere before Paul Revere, but
I was
less.
going to bring up Paul Revere.
Yeah, it's the less famous female Paul Revere because we're Canadian. Let's see what else in there. And then in 1841. Lower and Upper Canada were merged into a single province of Canada,
becoming full proper Canada.
Yeah, basically it became one instead of two. Province of Canada. I'm going to try to find a thing for that. Where the frig? Oh, 1867, which is also by chance right around the time when we signed when we became a country. If I'm not mistaken. Yeah, the Constitution Act of 1867 is a major part of the Constitution of Canada. The Act created a federal dominion and defines much of the operation of the government of Canada, including federal structure, the House of Commons, the Senate. So basically, this is where we decided we were ready to go out on our own.
Yeah. In what year specifically?
1867.
100 years after the United States.
Pretty much, yeah. Yeah, 1867 divides the province of Canada. Oh, sorry, timeline. 1867 is when it divides province of Canada into Ontario, Quebec, and joins them with New Brunswick, Nova Scotia to form a confederated state called the Dominion of Canada. So 1867 is when we celebrate. So Canada Day is January 1st because that's when that happened. January 1st, 1867. 3 days before the 4th of July because we have to do it early. Just like Thanksgiving.
You said January 1st.
July, I'm sorry.
Oh.
Yeah, July 1st. Sorry.
He's confusing me.
And then a few years after that is actually another important moment for the Métis, which is people of French and Native American mixed blood. And that is when a group of Métis led by Louis Riel mount the Red River Rebellion against Canadian intrusion in the Red River Colony. The Canadian government regains control after acceding to many of Riel's demands, but he flees into exile in the United States after the government refused to grant him amnesty. So basically, he was a wanted criminal. And he wanted rights for his people, and they ended up getting it, but at what cost, right?
You want, but at what cost?
To the point, like nowadays here in Canada, Native Americans, they get a lot of benefits and what have you. Métis, though, because they only get half the benefits. Yeah.
Because of him?
No, well, because of him, because of what he fought for. But Métis, I guess, back in the old days was considered like, think about it as Harry Potter, mudblood. They were dirty, right?
They were considered that.
Exactly. And then in 1870, you had concluding a series of agreements between Canada, the United Kingdom, and the Hudson's Bay Company. Canada acquires what was then known as Rupert's Land and the Northwestern Territory, forming the Northwest Territories, which is one of the three territories we have here in Canada. The next year, British Columbia and Vancouver Island amalgamate and then enter Confederation as British Columbia, Canada's 6th province. Prince Edward Island joins in 1873 as the 7th province. Let's see who else after that. Already the 20th century here. Alberta and Saskatchewan became their own provinces in 1905. Our Navy is barely 100 years old.
Oof.
1910. Yeah. So that's pretty much it so far. Like, and then now in the rest, we're getting into stuff that people know more about, like World War I, World War II, and that's going to be discussed at a later time. But that is a summary of important Canadian events. Like I said, we're still fairly young in the grand scheme of things.
Not as young as we are.
Exactly. So there's a lot less to talk about. Whereas, with 50 in his side of the world, there's definitely a lot of very important history because, believe it or not, a lot of, especially for a lot of us over here with our religious views, Israel is basically the motherland, right? Because like the Bible, it starts off with the Old Testament, which is, if I'm not mistaken, is the Torah as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
The Old Testament, yeah, the five major books of
right.
the Old Testament.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, first major difference that I'm noticing what we're going to have here is you're you basically, after living several hundred years as Upper Canada, Lower Canada, you decided to unite, becoming what is known as real Canada.
Yeah.
The major difference you're going to see here with me is that we were ruled by other people until eventually we decided to break away from what the ruling government was at the time and declare our independence from someone that a lot of countries in the world have declared their independence from, which will
Us included.
yeah.
Well, not so much, because we still, while we don't answer to the Queen, we still do officially, or to the King now, we do officially acknowledge them as a head of state, but they really don't have any power over here.
Goblin King, you have no power over me.
Pretty much.
So you're an independent state, but you still consider yourselves under the rule of the king?
In a way, like, we have what's known as a governor general, which is basically like a middleman between the prime minister and the monarchy. But the monarchy doesn't really have any final say. It's more or less like, I don't want to say a mentorship, but it's basically, they like to keep up with what the affairs are, but they don't have any say in what goes on over here.
Keeping up with the
It's a little weird.
Canadians.
Pretty much. It's a very, very weird thing.
I just, while you were talking, I added this to our roster, and I am going to use this thing a lot.
Canadians are weird.
That is a Canadian show too.
Yeah, Canadian show produced and made in Canada, but never broadcast in Canada.
So this is basically the definition of the Governor General of Canada. It's a federal vice-regal representative of the Canadian monarch. So the King is the head of state of Canada and 14 other Commonwealth reigns, but he resides in his oldest and most populous realms, the United Kingdom. The King, on the advice of his Canadian Prime Minister, appoints a Governor General to carry on the government of Canada in the King's name, performing many of his constitutional and ceremonial duties. So basically, it's like Santa Claus and Santa Claus's helpers.
Pretty much.
That's what it is. And it was pretty cool is that the lady currently, Mary Simon, is who was sworn in 2021 and is Anik leader from Nunavut in Quebec. She's the first Indigenous person to hold the office ever, which is amazing considering Indigenous is the oldest living people in Canada.
That's progressive.
Yeah, progressive at a slow rate.
It's evolving, but backwards.
Pretty much. So tell us about Israel.
So remind us all again, how far back did you had to go for that explanation?
The 15th century, 1400s.
Right. That's cute. So for my breakdown, for my breakdown, we're going way back, all the way to the 1st century BC. 5th of August, 1970 to be specific. Sorry, not 19. 5th of August, 70 to be specific. To the destruction of the Second Jewish Temple by the Roman Empire and effectively the exile of the Jewish people from from what they consider to be the Promised Land. That is right there, I believe, on Titus's Gate in Rome.
I've seen this. This is on a giant arch, isn't it?
Yeah, a Victory Gate. It's called a Victory Gate.
Yes, I've seen this before.
The Romans just built these giant arches with historical events depicted on them. So when the conquering armies came back to their home cities, they would pass through those gates as a sign of victory over the conquered. And this is the one for Roman Emperor Titus when he essentially conquered Israel and destroyed, rather the land of Israel, as it was known at the time, and essentially brought the menorah, the most holy Jewish artifact of all time, back into Rome, and that artifact is now since gone without a trace.
I think
Ever
most
since.
artifacts, unfortunately.
Yeah. Couple of days later, Pompeii happened. So
Really?
yeah. So a lot of scholars are kind of saying that, Pompeii happened because Titus destroyed the Jewish temple.
Doctor Who almost got it right.
Pretty much, yeah.
I love it.
And would you believe that there were two doctors in that event? One on the TV and one in the Big Finish. Two that I'm aware of, by the way.
Well, obviously Tennant is the famous one, but who's the other one?
McCoy.
Interesting. Okay, I would have
It was
thought
a completely different story where the Doctor landed in Pompeii, believing he's never allowed to leave because when he was in his fifth incarnation, they found his TARDIS sort of preserved in the wreckage of Pompeii, so he thought that this was where he was going to die. It's a really cool story called The Fires of Vulcan. Not to be confused with The Fires of Pompeii, the David Tennant story. Anyways, that's my Doctor Who reference for the day. So, as I mentioned, the Jewish people were devastated after the destruction of the Second Jewish Temple. About 60-ish years later, there was the famous Simon Bar Kokhba rebellion. Story for another time. Long in the future, but yeah, after that, pretty much the Jews have sort of lost favor with the Romans, and so the Romans, to punish them, scattered them all over the Roman Empire. Wow. That's why for hundreds and hundreds of years, that's why there are no existing proper Jewish people from the Promised Land. Every single Jew living in the world today has grown up after centuries and centuries of adapting other cultures from the different countries that they migrated to.
The tribe of Israel comes into play?
No, the last tribe of Israel, that's hundreds of years before that.
Right. That's still in biblical times, right?
Yeah. From right after Moses and right before King David.
So basically, during Exodus.
No. Exodus, that's the story of Moses and
after Exodus,
leaving Egypt. And I can't remember what the English name for the one after Exodus is, but
okay, my bad.
Actually, I'm pretty sure that that's actually the final one. But are you still listening, by the way? Because I don't know. I don't know the size of your room. I don't know if you can still hear me.
I'll be right there.
Okay. So in the meantime, I'm just gonna play this.
Canadians are weird.
Sorry, I had to go find. I actually have a Bible. While I'm not religious, it's just like more of a comfort thing. So, and this has actually been handed down by my grandmother, so that too. Okay, so this is the first 5 books in the Old Testament: is Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy.
Pretty sure Deuteronomy is the. No, wait. What did you say was after Exodus?
Leviticus.
Yeah, so that's the one where Moses is leading all the people from Egypt through 40 years in the desert, and the one after that is settling, and then after that, that's King David. And anyways, story for another time, as I mentioned. So for hundreds and hundreds of years, Jews have been living scattered all over Europe and all over the Middle East and most of North Africa. Very, very, very few have actually migrated all the way to Japan or China. But again, very, very scant few. That's why there are very, very few actual proper Japanese, Chinese, or Korean people in Israel, because We just didn't get that far.
That's too funny.
But the majority were scattered all over Europe, or rather half all over Europe and the other half in like what would later become known as Muslim or Arab countries, which sort of created a divide between Ashkenazi Jews and Spanish Jews. The name Spanish Jews, Ashkenazi.
Okay.
That's sort of the Europeans, or in other words, white people.
Okay.
Just use, it's not the best example, but just use Ashkenazi as a sort of stand-in term for white Jews and sort of
colonizers.
Yeah. Ironically, when it's used on this particular people, but the Spanish Jews or the Eastern Jews are darker skinned and from Muslim or Arab countries in origin. Okay, so after hundreds of years of not being allowed to return, obviously, eventually, at some point, the Roman Empire fell, became the Byzantine Empire. Then the Muslim Caliphate came in and sort of conquered the majority of the Middle East and Spain as well. The ruling hand has sort of changed hands for the next few centuries before eventually in, I wonder if I can get this right, 1499, I believe, was when the Ottoman Empire conquered the region of Israel properly. And the Ottomans have actually ruled here arguably more than most other empires in history. They ruled here for almost 500 years, which is more than almost any other empire in the world. Here,
I'm looking it up, and it doesn't say anything about that in the events of 1499. At least not that I'm seeing.
Again, maybe it's 15 something. Hold on, let me just.
You keep talking, I'll look it up. Ottoman Empire.
So the Ottoman Empire ruled here, and around the 1800s is when the rules regarding Jews being allowed to return home and resettle what used to be their promised land several centuries before that. That was when the rules regarding that sort of became much more lenient, and Jews were allowed to return, but a lot of them did not. And the ones that did mainly came back in incredibly small numbers, because a lot of them have been living in European territories for several generations now, and they've become really, really comfortable with their positions there. They become really, really integrated into the culture and the society there, and they had very few reasons to leave. Then, obviously, around the late 18th century and the late 19th century and early 20th century, that's when a lot of pogroms and a lot of anti-Jewish.
15.
What?
1517.
1517, yeah. Now that makes more sense, and my dad is going to kill me. So, yeah. It's almost 400 years. Think about that. 400 years. So then after, like I said, a lot of pogroms and anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish events have started happening, and a lot of Jews were driven from their homes, murdered, and persecuted. So
I sense a pattern here.
Yeah, I mean, we've been doing that for 5,000 years. Anyway, so a lot of them started coming back to what the Jews in the world called the land of Israel, the region which the majority of the world used to call Palestine at the time, because while the rest of the world called this region Palestine following the Roman Empire's decree, for the Jews in other Roman territories, this was still known as the land of Israel. So I'm just going to drop a little bonus fact on you right here. So back in, as you say, biblical times, the sworn enemy of the Jews who lived in the kingdom of Israel back in the day were the Philistines.
Mm-hmm.
People who came originally from the Greek islands to try and settled on what will later become known as the Israeli city of Ashdod and Ashkelon. Go ahead.
So I was gonna say, fun little fact: Philistine is actually a derogatory. Is used as a derogatory term over here. It's like as a pig. Like it's very weird.
I didn't know that, and I never knew how that came about.
You don't hear it a lot anymore, but you would come across it in things like prior years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's like when Taco blew my mind when I did the Doctor Who Pokemon types video.
Yeah.
One of the characters is literally called Nimrod, and that's when he laid it on me that for him, Nimrod is like an insult.
It is an insult over here, and there's a piece we play every Remembrance Day with my local community band, and it's called Nimrod. And yeah, I just laugh every time because I know it as the insult.
Well, for us, Nimrod was a Jewish king.
Which I just found out last year by watching a documentary.
Cool. Now, as I was saying, so the old ancient enemy of the Jews were the Philistines, who originally originated from Greece. And by the way, you know the story of David and Goliath? Goliath was one of the Philistines. He was arguably the most prominent member.
That might be where it comes from.
Maybe. Who knows? And if you're familiar with the story of Samson and Delilah, Delilah is also from the Philistines in the whole story
Which
with
is
Samson.
starting to make sense because the Philistines are basically the villains of the Bible. Philistine is basically, it is another word for the villain.
You know what? You're right. That does start to make sense a lot. But after
sorry, this is the definition according to Oxford Dictionary on what Philistine is a noun: a person who is hostile or indifferent to culture and the arts, or who has no understanding of them.
I wonder where that came from.
I know, right?
Yeah, history is written by the victors. In any case, so
to the victors go the spoils.
Yeah. So after the Romans sort of banished the Jews from their homeland, and after the Simon Bar Kokhba rebellion, uprising, whatever you want to call it, they renamed, and this is very important to note here, they renamed the Israeli coastal line as the land of Philistine, and sort of to mock the Jews even further, they named the coastal line Philistine, specifically because they knew how much the Jews hated them. Okay, just the coastal line, not the whole region, just the coastal line from Haifa all the way up to Ashkelon. Okay, Jesus. or rather what is now known as the Gaza Strip. Are we clear on really? That?
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting to know.
Okay, so because a lot of people are determined to get that wrong. So just the coastal line of Israel was named the land of Philistine. And then when the Muslim Caliphate arrived here after the Byzantine Empire had already gone and left, that is when they renamed this land, this coastal line, Palestine, because it was easier for them to pronounce. Okay, so remember, not the whole country is called Palestine. Originally, it was just the coastal line, but they consider Palestine to be the pseudo name for the entire region.
Yeah, okay, that does make more sense because I have heard it referred to as Palestine for sure.
Yeah, they changed a lot of things. Like one of the most important rivers in Israel, the Banyas, which is one of the main rivers that flows into the Sea of Galilee, was originally named Panaias after the Greek god Pan. And again, when the Muslims arrived, they renamed it Banyas because it's easier for them to pronounce. And still to this day, it's known as the Banyas.
What's it called now?
The Banyas.
Oh, that is its name. Okay, sorry.
It was originally called Panaias after the Greek god, but now it's called Banyas because it's easier to pronounce. It was easier at the time for them to pronounce.
Yeah.
So, during a lot of the anti-Semite and anti-Israeli acts of violence, let's call it that way, then came this guy, Benjamin Theodor Zev Herzl, a Hungarian man, if I'm not mistaken. He originally was originally was not a Jewish supporter, but after seeing a lot of how Jews were unfairly treated in his country and many others, most notably the Dreyfus trial, where
I know that one.
a man was
Dreyfus.
he was tried unfairly, specifically because he was a Jew.
It was
that
like
is when this
the Dreyfus incident or something like that.
yeah.
Yeah, sorry, just to interrupt. If any of you are actually interested, there is a very awesome YouTube channel I follow called The History Guy, where he talks about history that deserves to be remembered. It's usually no more than 20 minutes. That's one of them. So go look that up. Go look it up. It's fascinating.
The trial of Dreyfus.
Yeah.
After seeing that, he completely changed his stance on the whole Jewish situation, and that is when he decided that it is now time for the Jews to have a country of their own.
Good on him.
He had Uganda in mind, but that's beside the point.
What?
Yeah, he actually legitimately thought about Uganda. And a lot of the Jews were like, no, dude. I mean, the Bible clearly says that it should be there.
Yeah, and basically you're going to go do to someone else what you don't want done to you. What the hell?
Which is another thing that's written in the Bible.
Eye for an eye.
Yeah, and then obviously, and around 1849, that's when a lot of steps and moves were starting to put in place to allow a lot of the Jews to sort of migrate from their territories into what is at the time called Palestine universally, or rather globally, but to Jews living in other countries, they called it the land of Israel. That's why in a lot of historic texts, the Jews refer to it as the land of Israel, while other people refer to it as Palestine, which is what it was originally named at the time. And then around 19...
The Dreyfus Affair. That's what it was called. The Dreyfus Affair.
Yeah, I know it as the Dreyfus trial because that's how we studied it in Israel.
In Western civilization, it's known as the Dreyfus Affair.
Okay. Language localization, I suppose. Yeah. But around 19... I can't remember if it was 1916 or 1917 because we recently had the 100th anniversary of it. But around that time, we had the Battle of Beersheba. My home city, by the way, which is one of the biggest and major victories for the Allied forces against... was it the Axis powers in World War I, or that was World War II?
I think it's World War I. Hold on, I'm gonna look that up. I want to say it is World War I. The Axis powers.
So while you're looking that up, what?
Let's see. Axis powers coalition. World War II. Sorry.
I can't remember what the name of the so the alliance between the Ottoman Empire and what was then Germany and Austro-Hungary at the time.
Yeah.
But anyways, like I said, the Ottoman Empire ruled the powers. The what? The Central Powers. Yes, the Central Powers. I now I remember that. Yeah. The Central Powers.
Germany was on the wrong side for both of them.
Of course they were.
Yeah, and that's actually how World War II came about because of
how badly they lost in the First War.
Exactly, because of the Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah. So, like I said, the Ottoman Empire rules this region at the time. They were in league with the Central Powers, and the British wanted to conquer this region and wanted to drive the Ottomans out of it. But after two failed battles in the Gaza Strip, they allied themselves with the ANZAC, the Australian New Zealandic something commandos. I can't remember what the other A is, but basically it's like a joint commando group between Australians and New Zealandic. That's why a lot of heritage sites in Israel and in my city in particular are dedicated to Australians and New Zealandics.
Really?
Into New Zealanders. Sorry, my bad.
I would like to see that one day.
Yeah, so they pulled off a sort of maneuver around what will later become known as my city, Beersheba, which is why the Third Battle of Gaza is also nicknamed the Battle of Beersheba, and that is how they won their biggest major victory at the time against the Central Powers and were able to drive the Ottoman Empire out of the entire region. And that is why the Allied powers, primarily the British and the French, were able to take control over the majority of the countries in the region, not just Israel, but also Egypt and Libya, Algeria, Morocco, etc., etc., etc. A lot of these countries have since, in various different decades, have declared their own independence from those particular countries. Now, around 1918, around the ending of World War I, that is when the British Mandate of Palestine had begun, which is basically like a mandate that was intended to last 30 years or 31 years. Again, numbers and dates I could be wrong about, but I think
wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey, yeah. So the British Mandate of Palestine was supposed to stand for at the very least 30 years and come to an end around the time of 1948, 100 years after some of the moves were put into place earlier that I mentioned with this guy, Herzl. Now, obviously, in between that, a certain World War II happened, and with that came another major event for the Jewish people, which is where that was really the major kick in the butt for a lot of the Jews, especially the European Jews, who finally decided that it was time for them to leave, that there's nothing left in Europe for them, they will never be accepted, and that is the time they need to go and found their own country in the Promised Land, as they called it, the land of Israel, as they've been continuing to call it, or as the rest of the world knew it, the land of Palestine. So a lot of the Holocaust survivors at the time started migrating from Europe and other territories to the land of Palestine. But then the British were not happy with that decision and they started halting the Jewish ships right at the harbor, dragging them away and then turning them back. So again, let me just put this into perspective for you. These people who have survived mass genocide are running away from the places that remind them of said genocide to try and come to a promised land, but the British tell them, no, go back where you came from.
That's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, you're right. You hit the nail on the head. So that is when a lot of Israeli.
Imagine if 2020 common sense was around back then. That's what they're trying to do, dumbasses.
Yeah, unfortunately, those who forget their own history are doomed to repeat it.
Yep.
And so, thankfully, because of all the other migrations that happened decades, if not centuries before that, there were a lot of people still, a lot of Jews still living in the land of Palestine at that time. And a lot of them have formed their own unique groups to sort of help industrialize the region a little bit more. A lot of them started building cities and kibbutzes and other Jewish settlements. By the way, the city of Tel Aviv was founded around the time of 1902.
Oh, wow.
If I remember, no, 1912. I think.
Let's see.
Don't quote me on that, but yeah, I remember a couple of years ago they had like the 100-year celebration for Tel Aviv or something like that. So a lot of
1909.
Really? That 1909?
Yep, founded April 11th, 1909.
Wow, I was way off.
Yep,
but
named for Tel Aviv in Ezekiel 3:15.
Cool. So a lot of these groups that have already started farming and industrializing and agriculturalizing the region, they form their own unique groups, which essentially, by today's standards, they would be considered guerrilla groups. Some of them were also military groups. We'll get to those, but what they really put into play here is that they very sneakily in the dead of night found these migrator ships with the Jews who escaped the horrors of the Holocaust from Europe, and sort of found ways to sneak them into the country without the British people knowing about it. All right.
Wow.
So a lot of these groups, namely the Palmach and the Haganah, which Palmach is a acronym for Plugot Lochem, which is warrior divisions. Haganah literally means, it's literally the Hebrew word for defense.
Okay.
And somewhere around the time, some people from these larger groups splintered off and founded their own unique groups, specifically Etzel, Irgun Tzvai Lochem, warrior military organization, and Nili. No, not Nili, sorry. My bad. Lechi.
Larry?
What?
It's called Larry?
Lechi.
Okay. Sorry.
Lechi. It's Lochmei Cherut Israel, the warriors of Israel's liberty. Curiously, none of them decided to call themselves the Judean People's Front, but that's a story for another time.
Or is it the People's Front of Judea?
Or the Populous Front of Judea.
You got it. Yes.
Of course I did.
Life of Brian, folks. Go check it out.
Yeah. Great movie. Gets a lot of stuff wrong. Anyway.
Of course.
So these Etzel and Lechi were the extremists. The Haganah and the Palmach were still doing illegal stuff, but like smuggling these people back into their own country. But the Etzel and Lechi were the ones really in sort of active aggression against the British people who still ruled the area. Still to this day, by the way, you still can find guns and other weapons buried underneath old buildings that the Etzel and Lechi hid during those times. So they formed lots of acts of aggression. One of the times, the Etzel really performed a massive act of aggression against the British. The British then pulled sanctions on a lot of the Jews living in Israel. It was a really messy time until eventually the British got fed up with it, and around the 29th, fitting for today's date, the 29th of November, they were like, look, all right, we're done with this. Our mandate is almost over. We turn to the newly founded United Nations to help settle the problem here. Okay, because remember, before World War II, there was no United Nations. It was the League of Nations, which at the time wasn't really as official or committing as the United Nations have been since the end of World War II, and it was the United Nations job, essentially in a way, to sort of decide the fate of what will eventually be the land of Palestine, and that is when the Peel Committee. I think maybe I got that wrong. The Peel Committee might have been a few years earlier, but around the 29th of November, 1947, that is when the United Nations proposed that there will be two states founded in the land of Palestine, a Jewish state for the Jews called the State of Israel, and a Muslim state for the for the Muslims or Arabs living in the area. And this is the plan that they had, to sort of split this region in two. And this is really the map that I wanted to bring up. And
I haven't seen.
Yeah, you haven't been spoiled. And I'm not going to lie, this is literally what they wanted this country to look like. Okay, prepare yourselves, people. If you know, you know. But if you don't, this will be a shock to you.
Let me guess. It feels like that big.
Yeah, this is what the United Nations thought was appropriate. How was appropriate to split this region in two?
What?
Yes. So the green territories would be given to the Jews, and the orange ones would be given to the Arabs.
That's
The
not
Muslims.
splitting him in two. That's dissecting it.
Yes. Can you see the problems with this?
Yeah, just a little bit. Just to get to the other part of your country, you have to go through war. What the hell?
Yeah. And you see that that little white smudge in the center there?
Yeah.
That's Jerusalem, which the United Nations wanted to be international territory at the time.
Why?
Because they wanted to have some sort of control in the area. They wanted Jerusalem to be a international city.
Stupid white people.
Yeah, stupid white people making all the decisions. Now, giving this decision to split the country, there were two major reactions to it. The Jews,
No, and hell no.
no. The Jews were overjoyed. They were excited. They were happy that they would finally have a country of their own, safe from the persecution of the people from Europe. Muslims, on the other hand, were not happy, and this is where we might get a little bit political. But what I always say is, politics is history of the present. Okay,
you're 100% right.
Yeah, if you disagree, again, like the events that happened over the weekend, politics. 9/11, history, because it happened years ago, right? So
at the time, political.
It was political at the time, but now it's history, right?
Just like, well, for me going there, January 6th, at the time, very political, still political, but it'll be history soon.
Yeah, just like what happened this weekend will be history in a couple of years, just like the moon landing, political at the time, history to us. So again, if anyone has an issue with what I'm about to say, read a damn history book.
Agreed.
Okay?
We're not here to placate anyone's personal opinions. We're here to state what is legitimately written down and in fact.
Yeah. And stay away from fake news, because like I said, the Jews were overjoyed about this decision. The Muslims weren't. They were not happy with this decision. And again, if you have a problem with what I'm about to say, read a damn history book. They wanted the whole territory for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So what they did was after being completely quiet while all the British and the Jewish guerrilla groups had their affair, they had nothing to do with this whole affair. They were just, in for lack of a better word, sitting back, eating popcorn and watching the madness ensue. As soon as they saw this decision, they got angry and they started attacking the Israeli settlements that were already there at the time, and they started attacking the Jewish military groups, which did nothing. Okay, they did nothing because they knew they can't risk this becoming a reality. They needed to wait 18 months for the mandate to be over so that they can finally make preparations to declare a country of their own. So after months and months and months of the Muslim guerrilla groups at the time attacking Jewish citizens who lived in these territories, on the 22nd of May, 1948, took me a second because we remember it. We have our own calendar, so it's a different date for us. But we have a Jewish calendar. Like, that's a thing. Like, we measure the days of the month differently. We have our own set of months. We have, that by the way, that is where the name Hanukkah came from. Like, that is literally the name of the date.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So on what would be considered the 22nd of May.
So is it the year 5,783 for you?
Yes. Which, by the way, our years even aren't measured with numbers. They are measured with letters.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm looking at the Jewish calendar right now. You're right.
They're measured in letters for the name of the years and the numbers of days of the month.
So Saturday is literally Shabbat.
Yeah,
Well, according to what I'm looking at.
the origin of that name, the etymology of that name, story for another day, which literally has to do with the actual Bible and stuff. But
makes sense. I was today years old when I found out Jewish literally lived on their own time.
Well, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey. So on, I'm gonna take this off because it's getting pretty hot in here. So on the 22nd of May, 1948, this happened, the official Declaration of Independence.
Yes, you have mentioned this a few times to me before.
Yeah. David Ben-Gurion would eventually become the first prime minister of Israel, and that is where he stood and started reading the Israeli Declaration of Independence. Yeah, I'm not going to read out the whole thing because
that's another that's another episode for another day. But yeah, because I know this is an important thing for you.
Yeah, so just like the Americans have their own Declaration of Independence, this is the Israeli Declaration of Independence, and in this speech, he openly called out to the Jewish militia groups not to fight back, not to form any acts of aggression until the founding of the country herself. The day after the Declaration of Independence, that is when the Israeli War of Independence began, where the newly founded, one-day-old Israeli state, the State of Israel, as it was called, went to war with no less than 7 Arab nations, which I could be wrong here, but it was Egypt, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq.
Wow.
And I think maybe Saudi Arabia. I don't know. Again, I could be wrong about this. You could look this up. Again, I'm doing this all from memory.
Yep.
7 Arab nations, including the Arabs who still lived in the region that was up until that point named Palestine, and the war eventually ended with a decisive victory for the newly found state of Israel. All these small militia groups were disbanded to reform into what was then called the IDF, Israeli Defense Force, which eventually became the main military for Israel, for the new state of Israel. And now every single Israeli citizen, myself included, had to have served at least 3 years for men, 2 years for women in that in this military. And eventually, like I said, the military eventually won out, and I should have had a second map prepared for this, but remember, this was the plan that the United Nations wanted. I am now looking up a map, an updated map of how the new state of Israel was after the War of Independence. Hold on. Nope, this is a more updated one. 1948. Okay, so, I think this one will do. Live TV, folks.
Oh, gotta love it.
So again, remember, this is the original plan. This is what eventually became the thing. So everything you see in white, not occupied by the Jewish state, which primarily, you can't see my mouse cursor here, but which primarily includes the Gaza Strip and the areas known as Judea and Samaria, which were at the time owned by Jordan. And the Gaza Strip was then owned by Egypt. The rest of it owned by Israel and right up until the 6-Day War, the War of 1967, where once again Israel went to war with 6 or 7 Arab and Muslim countries and won in 6 days, claiming all of the territories that it didn't have at the time, plus a few other ones, the entire Sinai Peninsula and the Golan Heights. They also had the Gaza Strip and the Judea and Samaria. And then obviously a lot of issues started cropping up. That is when the Arab refugees who lived in the areas that was called Palestine before the War of Independence, that is around the time where they changed their name to Palestinians and began claiming that they lived there for hundreds and hundreds of years. And again, read a history book. The actual word Palestinians did not exist before the 1960s. Look it up.
Really?
They called themselves Palestinians after the 6-Day War. They didn't call themselves Palestinian before the War of Independence, and they sure as hell didn't call themselves that after the War of Independence. Again, read a history book. It's all there.
Does Palestinian mean procrastination?
Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, so then obviously the Yom Kippur War happened in 1972, which is, again, a lot of problems started rising. Then a series of peace treaties between Israel and a lot of its Arab state neighbors. Obviously, the peace treaty with Egypt, which is where Israel basically gave the entire Sinai Peninsula back to Egypt, and a peace treaty with Jordan, and a lot of complicated talks have been going on with Syria. So for right now, maybe I'll just look up a more updated map of Israel. And again, some people could dispute this, but we kind of knew what we were getting ourselves into when we decided to make this show. So this right now is an official map of Israel, and that's a bear. Yay. Hello, bear. So as you can see here in this updated map, Israel claims ownership of the Golan Heights, Gaza Strip, and the 1967 territories, which include Judea and Samaria, which to some people it does not own. But again, it's a dispute that could go on for decades, if not centuries. But right now, that is what an official updated Israeli map looks like. I'm gonna. Okay. Oh, this is a really good video. See, this is the value of visual aids, people.
100%. And I will definitely, trust me, when I do my topics, I will have better preparation, especially for the things I'm really passionate about. You'll be damn skippy if I don't have pictures from like early 20th century hockey.
I mean, for that, I'm expecting video clips.
If I can find any, I will.
So this is what I was talking about earlier. The Sinai Peninsula, everything in orange is what Israel claimed after the 6-Day War.
Gotcha.
You see up there the Golan Heights, the West Bank. I knew they had a name. The West Bank, Gaza Strip, and the Sinai Peninsula. And this is what it officially looks like today. You see the Gaza Strip is sort of outlined there, as well as the West Bank and the Golan Heights. Officially, Israel still technically owns those territories, but to the rest of the world, they don't. Now, the West Bank is primarily populated by, or rather occupied by the Palestinian Authority, and they have their own military there. They have their own government, and occasionally, or rather officially, I should say, Israelis are not allowed in those territories, but there's a lot of disputes there of illegal construction of cities and settlements there, As for the Gaza Strip, around 2005 or 6, I can't remember, there was a massive detachment operation from the Gaza Strip. Like Israeli Jewish families driven from their homes by Israeli soldiers. It's very important to note here. Israeli families, Israeli citizens driven from their homes that they've cultivated for years, if not decades. They had businesses, farmlands, like the works in the Gaza Strip, driven from their homes by Israeli soldiers in order to allow Palestinians, or other people who call themselves Palestinians at the time, to live there. And since, again, read a history book, the entire strip has pretty much been returned into a staging point for a radical Muslim terrorist organization known as Hamas. There are still citizens who live there, citizens who want nothing to do with Israel. They just want to live their lives, but unfortunately, their lives are being terrorized by this Hamas organization. And to a lot of people, the citizens who live in the Gaza Strip, who want nothing to do with life in Israel, they just want to exist and live peacefully. To a lot of people, these citizens are guilty by association. Same thing with the West Bank territories, or occupied by the Palestinian Authority. And as for the Golan Heights, completely, even though this map disagrees, completely 100% at this point of recording, at this time, completely 100% occupied by Israel and governed by Israel. And pretty sure that's about all I can say on that topic. And I just lost my throat talking about all this stuff.
Wow, that pretty much brings us, I'm assuming that brings us to the end then.
Yeah, I mean, we're over an hour, so
yeah. So yeah, definitely expect more like this. And like I said, there's some things I definitely want to talk about. Like I want to talk about the first Canadian WrestleMania. I'm going to get you to watch a wrestling pay-per-view for that one.
I mean, if I finally got you to watch classic Doctor Who.
Yep. There you go. So yeah, no, there's definitely gonna be things, and like there's a lot of things that 50 Cent in here that I'm very much interested in, and things I'm interested in learning more about, things like the Dreyfus Affair and all that stuff. Just out of curiosity, do you know who Simon Pereira is?
No.
Okay. There's just something I came across recently about how there was possibly more messiahs before Jesus because of Gabriel's revelation, which is a stone tablet. I was wondering if you'd ever heard about that.
Okay.
Nope, I guess not.
I mean, of course there were more prophets before.
No, but I mean like Messiah, not prophets.
Oh, sorry, you said Messiah. Yeah. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah, see, to someone over here, that was a new concept to me. Like, because Jesus is the Messiah, but then you hear that there might have been messiahs prior to that, and it's like, well, that's interesting.
Well, as far as the true believing Jews, Jesus was not a Messiah.
No, of course.
As far as they are concerned.
Yeah, no.
Again, people do tend to forget Jesus was Jewish the whole time. Everything he was preaching God's word, and people just took it the wrong way and made their own religion out of it.
Which always boggles my mind that the Christians are so harsh against the Jews. It's like, you guys are just literally making fun of your own savior.
Yeah, pretty much. And like, I don't know where the English name originated from, but in Hebrew,
it's not Jesus.
No, well, it's Joshua. Yeah, but
Yeshua.
Yeah, Yehoshua.
Oh, okay, sorry.
That's the Hebrew name.
Yeah.
But when after Jesus was crucified, that the radical Jewish believers at the time, the Haredis, as we call them, they wanted his name to be forgotten, and they basically wanted his name for all time, always. And they renamed him Yeshu, which is an acronym of Yimach Shmo V'Zichro, may his name and memory be forgotten. And that is where the word Jesus came from.
Really?
Yeah. The name,
I did not know that.
The Hebrew name for Jesus, which is Yeshu, basically came from the Haredic Jews who wanted his name and memory to be forgotten. That is why they gave him that name.
Yeah, because from what I've read, his name was Yeshua. Because if I'm not mistaken, there was no J letter or something like that. I think it wasn't a letter that exists or existed.
Technically, there still isn't in Hebrew.
Yeah, so it was like Yeshua. Was it Yeshua ben Joseph or Yeshua bar Joseph?
Yehoshua ben Yosef.
Yeah.
Joshua Joseph.
And this is why
because back in biblical times, there were no last names. You were just named after your father.
Well, that's the same with Scandinavians. That's why if you hear names like Olaf or Pedersen, that's because it's literally Peter's son.
Yeah, and it's the same for the women's too. It's Olaf's daughter.
Yeah.
Or Jorgen's daughter.
Yeah. So Hela, Odin's daughter. Thor Odinson.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Loki Odinson. Loki's son.
Exactly. Yeah. No, there's definitely a lot of stuff I'm looking forward to learning from you. Because yeah, no kidding. I will full disclosure, I will primarily be focusing on more like the pop culture stuff of Canada, but I will definitely
me too. Again, whenever these instances of history and politics colliding, we're gonna try to stay away from that.
It's too adorable. Yeah, no, of course, unless it's it's warranted.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, the Simon Bar Kokhba uprising. That is definitely a topic I want to cover. Obviously, the Hanukkah, but should probably say that for Hanukkah, which is in about a year.
Yeah,
Purim, obviously, which is coming up in a few weeks.
That's one I'm looking forward to because I've always wanted to learn more about Purim.
Yeah, that's the one I really need to brush up on. I know the basics and I know the names of the people involved. Just the specifics, I just forgotten about because it's been a while since we covered this in school.
No, kidding. Yeah, it's the same with me. It's been a long time since I've covered some stuff in school. But yeah, no, there's definitely.
But for some reason, stuff like Hanukkah is just burned into my mind, and I can't forget about it.
Right. Well, that's because it's like an equivalent to Christmas almost.
Pretty much, even though it came out years before that.
Yeah, and if anybody wants to learn to watch a good show that tells you the origins of Passover and some of that, watch the Rugrats Hanukkah special. I'm not kidding. Anything I know is usually mostly comes from there.
You said Passover.
Was it Passover or was it Hanukkah? Okay. The special.
Two completely different episodes. Two completely different holidays. Hanukkah is when they tried to kill all the Jews.
Yeah, but which one? Is it Passover then for the Rugrats special?
I don't know, but you interrupted me during a bit. It's like they're two completely separate holidays. Hanukkah is when they try to kill all the Jews, but with candles, and Passover is when they try to kill all the Jews, but with matzahs. And Purim is when they try to kill all the Jews with costumes. Like two completely different holidays.
So basically, you celebrate things where you've almost died.
Yeah, I always make the joke. Every Jewish holiday is when they tried to kill us and failed. Purim, Passover, Hanukkah, Holocaust Day.
Lag
BaOmer, same thing. And Rosh Hashanah is basically us celebrating the fact that we survived a full year without dying.
Nice.
Without genocide.
Yay, we're alive. Basically.
We're still alive. We made it.
Yeah, till the next one.
Yeah.
Hey. All right. Well, I'd say should wrap it up. It's a good hour and 20 minutes. This dog looks like he needs to be taken out. So, or he's just really cuddly this morning, whichever one of the two. So yeah,
I'm gonna go with the latter.
Probably. So I'm going to be doing the next week's one, and that is when I'm going to be talking about the birth of the National Hockey League because, the National Hockey League, it's mostly American teams, blah, 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 but it's very Canadian in its origins. It was basically the agreement was signed in a room in a hotel in 1917. There's some great stories about there. It's the origins of like how the Stanley Cup came about and all that stuff. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. I can't wait.
I'm going to take this time to figure out what my topic is going to be.
Yeah. I figured because I that's something I when I was a kid, I read so much on hockey history. Yeah. All right. So 50, where can everybody find you when you're not educating me on Israel?
Well, you can find me educating you and other people on Doctor Who on my other show on this channel, The Greatest Show in the Galaxy, hopefully going back to a regular every Monday in sometime next month. But if you enjoy me talking about Doctor Who, I also have talk more Doctor Who on my channel, 50 Shades of Geek. I promise you it's in English, so you won't have a trouble following that up. And I do weekly reviews of Doctor Who episodes from 1963 all the way up to 2022, as well as some other stuff from time to time whenever I have time to work on other stuff.
And as for me, when I'm not trying to figure out what the hell he's looking at, you can find me over on this channel doing other shows, which will be probably bringing more to the table and probably reviving some old ones throughout the year. You can also find me over on the Let's Get Ready Network every Friday night doing the Brokes of Wrestling, where myself and my buddy Dagan, we break down everything that's gone on in the week of wrestling. Last night was the Royal Rumble. Last night as of this recording was the Royal Rumble, and the ending, like I said to 50, I would argue that the main storyline in WWE is better than most things on TV, in my opinion. But that like 50 says, that's another story.
Better than Power of the Doctor?
But that's not on right now. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, anything currently playing.
It's fairly recent.
I know, but I mean, just like if you compare it to anything other shows that are currently airing right now, I'd say it's better.
Okay, it's a good thing you made that comment when specifically Doctor Who isn't.
That's why yeah, because I know you. Doctor Who, nothing else. Well, Doctor Who, nothing else.
Yeah, I mean, don't you dare say that again around the 60th when we all get to see Beep the Meat.
Oh God, no.
For the first time.
Yeah, but yeah, as a continuously running weekly storyline, it's good shit, really good shit, and there'll be very few people you'll find who disagree with me on that. But anyways, so yeah, on behalf of myself and 50, thank you very much. Don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel. And of course, we are part of a bigger channel now as well. We are part of the Benverse, which is the easiest way to describe it. It's like the Benverse is Disney, we're ESPN, and then there's other channels as well that are under that umbrella, the Multiverse of Geekdom, Ben's own channel. Something to talk about. Our friend Taco's channel, Galaxy Geeks. Yes, thank you very much. So go follow all of these channels. You'll be able to find links over on our channel for them and vice versa. We're here to pretty much keep the legacy of Ben Rayner alive, and this is how we feel the best way to do it is. Exactly. Can't believe, man, it's been a month.
Me neither.
Yep, this month flies, eh? Hey, Bear? All right, so on behalf of myself and 50, thank you very much. Leave comments. If there's anything you want us to discuss, let us know, and we will definitely discuss it, because eventually we will be needing ideas. So, all right, guys, have fun, and don't forget, let your geek flag fly this week. We'll talk to you later.